Welcome back to College Football Addiction. Going to chat a little bit of Kansas State football with John Kurtz. You can search for John Kurtz here on YouTube. We'll get you some other info on how to connect and follow John here in a minute. But John, after the game last week against Houston, a little bit of a shocker. Like how surprised it was. I remember doing some Big 12 stuff before the weekend and just kind of saying like, well, may not be too much chaos, and then we had a ton of chaos, right? With Iowa State losing, Kansas State losing in the same weekend, both kind of unpredictable there. Just what's the mood? What are the thoughts coming off that Houston game? What's the big picture outlook? Kansas State certainly not out of things yet, but certainly not thrilled right now with where things are. I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean, it is crazy because for as bad a loss as it was, and I think it was a very bad loss. Take nothing away from Houston; they've been playing a lot better, and I'll get to more on that in a moment. But as bad as that loss was, looked, felt, all K-State has to do is win out and get one Colorado loss, and they're in the Big 12 championship game. So Iowa State losing helped a lot in terms of K-State's overall season outlook. And, the odds were probably always stacked against you being an at-large college football playoff selection anyway. So I'm not sure that in terms of like the big picture stuff that K-State wants to accomplish, that it changed things a whole heck of a lot. Now Colorado may win out, obviously it's taken destiny completely out of your hands, but it's not like they need 6 things to happen to get back into the Big 12 championship game race. But having said that, just not a good loss at all. It's been a week full of melting down for the fans. And rightfully so. Like, I get it. It was a pretty gross performance, and you've got to give I do want to start by giving Willie Fritz a lot of credit. Since Houston switched to Zion Chris at quarterback from Donovan Smith 4 games ago, they're 3-1, and the one game that they lost at Kansas, Chris got hurt in that game, and they had to go back to Donovan Smith. He threw 3 interceptions. So there's your ball game right there. Fritz knows how to coach defense, and they had a terrific defensive game plan, kind of just sitting back. It was a driving rainstorm for most of the game, which I think really actually hurt K-State, which is not an excuse. You can't let that be an excuse to go lose to a sub-500 Houston team. But the strategy then was they just kind of sat back, just had sort of cloud coverage back in the secondary, and were forcing Avery Johnson to throw into tight windows in the rain the entire game while being able to stop the run. And that's the thing that I think is most concerning to K-State fans right now, is since basically the fourth quarter of the Colorado game, they have not been able to run the ball very well. They clubbed West Virginia by doing it all through the air. Avery Johnson threw for almost 300 yards. But outside of that, like, Kansas kind of shut down their run. West Virginia shut down their run. And then Houston held K-State to under 100 yards rushing. We're talking about mid-season. K-State was one of the 10 best rushing attacks in the country. And now DJ Giddens, who is having a phenomenal year, just has not been able to get going. And so the analogy I keep using is like, if you're a pitcher, K-State's got the fastball is running the ball with DJ Giddens. And right now they don't seem to have their fastball. They've got more a mix of pitches, I think, than even last year's team did. Like, you've got Avery Johnson's legs. Avery Johnson's arm has developed. Like, you've got a curveball, slider, other things you can go to. But if that fastball isn't working, it really limits the effectiveness of everything else. And so, K-State fans have been tracking down a number of theories for that. The offensive line coach, Connor Riley, is his first year as the offensive coordinator. People wondering, like, hey, is he not getting enough work with the offensive line? And that's what the struggles have happened. I know there's a lot of slants and twists and stunts that have been used now from opposing defenses, but K-State just can't seem to figure it out. And that's been the biggest problem. Having said all of that, they were up 19-10 with about 12 minutes left in the fourth quarter and had the ball. And Houston had gone for 46 yards on its last 6 offensive drives. So the thing that's really stuck in the craw of K-State fans is, if you just go run, punt, run, punt, it did not feel like Houston was going to be able to drive even half the length of the field twice to score to beat you. And K-State put it in the air. It got intercepted, run back to the 9-yard line. They get a touchdown, and that was the spark that Houston needed to win. So they still, in spite of all that, basically had the game in hand in the fourth quarter and just let it slip away. So it's a tough one. It's a really, really brutal loss, and one that K-State fans are lamenting in a bunch of ways.
So looking ahead, they get the bye week to try and get some things fixed, and certainly comes at a good time. there. But they play some teams that have maybe been a little bit better than expected. Iowa State, I think people expected to be pretty good, but they've got some issues too, for sure. But, Dillingham's doing a pretty good job at Arizona State. I mean, Cincinnati's rebounded from kind of the way that we thought that their season would go early in the year. They were picked one of the last teams in the Big 12, and they're anything but that. Is it encouraging or more worrisome down the stretch? Because, like you said, if they went out and Colorado just drops one, they're right back where they need to be. But maybe the end of the schedule isn't as easy as once thought looking at these last 3 games.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think at the beginning of the year, you looked at it and were like, all right, you hit this point in the schedule, you can exhale for a couple of weeks because bye week Cincinnati, Arizona, or bye week Arizona State, Cincinnati at home, you'll be fine there. A lot tougher now. I mean, Arizona State looks pretty good. Cincinnati with Brennan Sorsby at quarterback this year, that's made a world of difference for them. Those are both teams absolutely capable of beating the K-State team that played in Houston, for sure. I think the advantage will be just playing at home. K-State's been a much better team at home throughout the year, which I think some of that has to do with, the obvious, but also it's a younger team, especially in terms of leadership, and I think that's something that hurt at Houston too. A lot of the leaders on the team are young, or like DJ Giddens, who's one of the best players, is about the most quiet football player you'll ever run into. So it's not like he's a vocal leader. So they're missing some of that, and at home, I think it's easier for a team like that to really get up and use the juice of the home crowd to help. I would also just say too, Chris Kleiman has been. The fan base gets frustrated because it seems like every year there's just like a WTF performance and loss. They lost to Arkansas State in 2020, lost to Tulane at the beginning of the year in 2022, which ended up looking a lot better. But, last year when Oklahoma State was playing horribly, K-State went and played a disgusting game in Stillwater that they lost. And everyone's like, what is that effort? Like, how did that happen? But after that, Chris Kleiman's also been great at riding the ship. Like, it generally doesn't turn into a long losing streak. And just when you think the season is really starting to head down the toilet, he's been really good. I think because he's kind of a culture player coach. I think he's able to get everybody back up. So I expect K-State to play pretty well. I think the bye week came at a really good time where they can really get to work and dive in on the running game. Like, what the hell is going on here? Let's figure this out and find a solution. So I would anticipate that they're going to play a lot better over the next 2 weeks. But I still don't feel very good about the trip to Ames. And I say that even as Iowa State is kind of trending downward in a similar fashion to K-State right now, because Matt Campbell has gotten the better of Chris Kleiman 3 of the 5 times they've played, and a couple of those times were blowouts and just embarrassing games like last year in the snow game. So it'll be a tough road to go if K-State is going to win out. I probably would not predict that. But I do think at least the next couple of weeks, they're in a pretty good position, as much respect as I have even for Cincinnati and Arizona State.
What do you, and I know that you said like the fan base is trying to diagnose it and trying to figure it out, and it'll be on the coaches that make way more than you or I to figure it out. But do you think they're able to adjust? Do you think they're able to get back to running the ball pretty well? Obviously, like if you have to rely on Avery only, like it can be pretty boom or bust. But do you, do you think they can kind of over these next couple of weeks get the running game going? Maybe not even if it was like it was at one point, just better than it has been.
I do, and a lot of that is just some blind faith in what they've done over the years. Like, they've always been really good at finding ways to manufacture a running game. I think back to even Chris Kleiman's first year he came in the program. When he arrived in Manhattan, they did not have a scholarship running back on the roster, and they still put together that wound up being an 8-4 team that beat Oklahoma and Lincoln Riley and Jalen Hurts, all those guys, because they could run the football. They found ways to do it. So I think they can get creative and do it. I think maybe some of it is just, Chris Kleiman talked a lot in his post-game press conference the other day after Houston about just we got to get back to the basics. And so I think a bye week is a really good time to be able to do that. I think DJ Giddens is still a great back. And one other thing I would point out that I think will help is just getting Avery Johnson some rest. Because if you remember back in the Colorado game, there was a moment where he got hurt and was out for like half a drive. And ever since then, K-State has not run him as much. And it seems like he is maybe trying to a little extra avoidant of hits since then. I just think he's been a little bit banged up. And so I think that takes away one of the better weapons that you really have. And even when he was running some, like at Houston, just didn't seem like he had the burst they had early on in the year. If you go back and watch like the Arizona game when he rushed for 100 yards and he just looked like video game fast, it hasn't seemed quite the same. So I think he's a guy that could really use the bye week. And so even if it's not him running all the time, if he can pop a couple of big ones, then all of a sudden just the threat of him becomes so much different. If it's a read option play, if he's standing back there with DJ, I think that'll help free some other things up in the running game. So that's another thing I would really look for that I think can be very beneficial here in the bye week.
We will certainly monitor, maintain that one in Ames is going to be a big one, especially if Kansas State can find a way to win these next couple, pending what Colorado does these next couple of weeks as well. We'll have to kind of see what time game times are announced and stuff like that later, because they play Oklahoma State, and not that they couldn't lose to Oklahoma State. It feels like that would be one that if Colorado's still undefeated, then it's Iowa State's opportunity to stay in the Big 12 hunt. If Colorado's dropped one, then Kansas State certainly has maybe a little more motivation to go out and win. Not that they wouldn't have motivation to try and get to 10 wins anyway, but that one at the end could certainly be massive. And a lot of fun. So, John, where can people follow you? Where can they find your work and get more of your content?
Yeah, so Big 12 fans, just search John Kurtz on YouTube. You can find my YouTube show there where I'm live twice a week. K-State fans, search for the 3 Mile podcast, wherever it is that you find podcasts. We're doing a couple of those shows a week as well. And I've got my Big 12 newsletter. If you want Big 12 news straight to your inbox, no SEC or Big 10 stuff, just all Big 12. You can go to it's open for business at ofbnews.com to subscribe to that. And you can follow me on Twitter at JL Kurtz.
The 3 Mile podcast, I've told you this on Twitter, has the best logo of anything I've seen, though. The bourbon and the whiskey there on it is pretty elite. So that's actually what caught my attention more than anything else. When I've seen that shared, I'm like, oh man, I need to go listen to this just for the bourbon on the logo. So it's good stuff, man. I appreciate you for hanging out.
Yeah, anytime.